there is, and know that right now, as it's become clear that Biden has decided, and we're doing this through reconciliation, that it's really just going to come down to a couple of Democrats who are going to attempt to be obstacles. There's going to be every right-wing think tank, every corporate think tank in the country is now going to be producing studies that show you should make the check available only to people making $40,000 a year or $50,000 a year. That the minimum wage, maybe we shouldn't do $15 an hour. I mean, this is what's going to happen. Now, the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, which is responsible for scoring bills. In other words, make an assessment as to what the expense of a certain bill is going to be. Now, the problem with this is that when you're talking about a bill, there's a bill like we're going to spend $50 million or $50 billion or whatever it is on buying everybody a pony. Okay, that's pretty easy to measure what the cost of that bill is going to be. It's going to cost $50 billion because you're going to spend that money on getting everybody a pony. Maybe you can do it. Maybe you can't. Maybe the CBO comes back and says you'll be able to get, half the country a pony, whatever it is. But then there are things like the minimum wage. How is that going to impact the federal budget? Some studies show that it could raise $65 billion a year because you've got more people are getting paid $15 an hour. That means more money is going into taxes, that they're paying taxes on that. We also know that the velocity of money for people who are making that amount of money is faster. In other words, it travels through the economy more. If I'm making $15 an hour, as opposed to someone who's making $500 an hour, that $15, I'm putting that out the door right away. I got a ton of bills. I want to buy some food. I'm going to spend that money immediately. Every extra dollar you give somebody making $500 an hour, they're not going to spend it. They're going to take it. They're going to invest it, whatever. The velocity of money for people at that end of the income spectrum is much faster. And so it creates more activity, and then it creates more taxes. But also, at the same time, maybe the minimum wage, you could do a study and you could see we're going to lose a certain amount of jobs over the course of 10 years. That's going to diminish tax revenues. Or it's going to save money on food stamps or whatnot. And then you also have to figure out, as you look down the road, what's going to happen with the economy over the next 10 years. And you know how predictable that is? Not very. Right? Nobody predicted a pandemic. Nobody predicted whatever it is. And so here is that's the tricky part about scoring something like the minimum wage. The CBO has done it. It starts with certain assumptions that are often influenced by who is running it. These people were appointed by Donald Trump and the Republican Senate. Former head of the American Enterprise Institute, right-wing think tank, developed these numbers. And so the CBO has come out and said that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the course of 10 years will increase the deficit by $65 billion. So $6 billion a year. $6 billion a year. Not very much money, but it's a figure, and it impacts the budget. And that is really what is involved in whether it's going to be a part of reconciliation. Here is Bernie Sanders being asked on Sunday about Joe Biden saying the $15 minimum wage might not make it into the COVID relief bill, ostensibly because Joe Biden happens to think the parliamentarian will keep it out. Now, the fact is that the vice president of the United States can overrule a parliamentarian's interpretation of a law, or of a rule, I should say, and let it in. But even in that instance, here's Bernie Sanders' case that it should be in that COVID relief bill.
You're the Senate Budget Committee chairman. Is President Biden wrong?
Well, I hope he is, Jake. As you indicated, the president supports the $15 an hour minimum wage. I do. The last poll I saw has 62% of the American people supporting it, because at the end of the day, we are in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality. People on top are doing phenomenally well, and yet we have literally tens of millions of Americans working for starvation wages. You cannot make it in any state in this country on $9 or $10 an hour. We've got to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I can tell you, as chairman of the Budget Committee, we have a room full of lawyers working as hard as we can to make the case to the parliamentarian that, in fact, raising the minimum wage will have significant budget implications and, in fact, should be consistent with reconciliation rules.
During the campaign, you were running for president, and you said whoever you picked as VP would overrule the parliamentarian in order to pass legislation such as Medicare for All with just 51 votes. Should Vice President Harris do that, overrule the parliamentarian to keep the minimum wage increase in this bill?
Well, before we get to what the vice president is going to do, I got to get through the parliamentarian, and then I got to get 50 votes in support of raising that minimum wage to $15 an hour. But I am working as hard as I can to make that happen. In America, people should not be working 40 or 50 hours a week and living in poverty. We've got to raise that minimum wage, which, Jake, has not been raised, unbelievably, since 2007.
Even if it makes it into the bill, you're going to need every Democrat on board. And West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin says he does not support increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. He has suggested he could get behind a lower amount, such as $11 an hour, which I think is what the rate is in West Virginia. Would you be willing to compromise in order to get Manchin's vote?
Now, I strongly look, a $15 an hour minimum wage is not a radical idea. Making $600 a week in the United States of America, barely, given the high cost of rent and all the other living expenses that people have to pay, that's not a lot of money. So these are debates that we're going to have within the Democratic caucus. But I hope and believe that at the end of the day, the members of the Democratic caucus understand that we do need to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage.
I just can't get over the idea that, first of all, I don't know how much Joe Manchin's worth. It's probably millions. I mean, probably more than that.
Sure.
I don't know, more than millions, but millions with an S. And the idea that he's like, it's too much, man. It's too much.
Also, I just looked it up, and I don't think that's right. West Virginia minimum wage, apparently it's $8.75. But that's still higher than the federal minimum wage.
It's higher than the federal minimum wage. I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe they figure out some type of waiver so that we can continue to screw one of the poorest states in the country,
right?
And keep them immiserated so that the rest of the people can get 15. They'll get 11. But people will really love Joe Manchin for that. Thank you, Senator.
Yes,
you were able to secure for us an $11 minimum wage, and we're not subject to that $15 minimum wage. God, I am so glad I don't have that extra $4 an hour that I'm making. Thank you, Joe Manchin.
Well, then
that is called the Joe Manchin discount.
Yeah, he got to brand himself as fiscally responsible, though. So I'm sure that they can eat that, right?
Exactly.
Eat that. Put that on their dinner plates.
Exactly. I went down to the supermarket. Went down to, I don't know what the name of the supermarket is in West Virginia.
But
Price Right.
Yeah, and also just so
my Manchin discount.
Your Manchin credit card.
Yeah.
The CBO score, I'm sure there is going to be in the coming days a complete dismantling of the math that got them to find that we would lose 1.4 million jobs. They're saying, because a lot of progressive economists are completely their reporting on that has or their studies on that have not found that at all. But the issue that is presented by this score is that it allows people like Joe Manchin to throw their hands up and not
Absolutely.
even touch this.
Absolutely.
So it's bad news. Even though exactly what you're saying is correct, the fact that yes, it can be now based on what the CBO found dealt with in reconciliation. That's the one piece of good news, but overwhelming is the bad news that it gives these centrist Democratic lawmakers and out
And
from
just
addressing this.
And just remember, we're talking about, depending on which bill is the basis of it, because it's not written quite yet. Bernie Sanders' proposal for the $15 minimum wage, I think, took 4 or 5 years. 5 years, I think, to roll in. And I think Biden's is actually even 4 years to roll in, is actually quicker than Sanders. But it wouldn't be $15 an hour tomorrow. It would be $15 an hour, depending on whose version, 4 or 5 years out. Maybe that's what we'll end up seeing, is that it's going to be like 6 years out or something. Or maybe they index it like it becomes $15 an hour 6 years out. If your minimum wage is, your median wage is this today, who knows? We'll see.